I just want to say thank you to Fred for this opportunity, and I believe that seeing things and working with youth and young adult, this is an area that we're kind of behind on.
We are.
And any education that we can do to save our young people is worthwhile. So let's just ask a blessing from our Lord as we get started. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day that you've given us. And Lord, tonight I just pray that you will pour out your blessings upon us as we learn more about the opioid abuse and how to treat it, Lord. And Lord, I pray that you help this information to get in many places, educate the young people, their parents, even older people. Lord, we need to get this information out. We just pray that you bless this effort. And bless Fred. Thank you for Fred leading out, and just give him strength and just the acuity of mind and heart, and bless him in a special way. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Especially want to thank Pastor Barton for the when we were contacting each other. I've never seen anyone so eager to have our presentation. So we're definitely glad to be here. And I want to thank Gabe, who's on the camera back there, for introducing me to Pastor Barton. One slight announcement before we get started in the program. Fentanyl is currently the drug of choice in Arizona. One major change that has taken place is that the cartels are allowing independent entrepreneurs to participate in their operation. This translates into kids in middle school, high school, college, young adults selling fentanyl. In the past, if you were purchasing drugs, you would have to buy those drugs through the gangs. This is happening because the vast majority of the young folks that are selling drugs now don't have a police record, and as a result of that, it's very difficult to trace them down. All of the gang members throughout the state, we have their names and numbers in a database that's accessible to all law enforcement. What has to happen in the very near future in order to deal with this very important trend that's taken place, it's going to require a massive expenditure of undercover agents in order to combat what is going on in our schools. As I said, this is happening in middle school, high school, college, and in our younger populations. In other words, the cartels are attacking our young people throughout the state. And with that, we'll get started with the presentation today. And our first speaker is Reverend Tina Marie Reeves. She's with the United Methodist Church, and she will speak on how to identify opiate abuse. Reverend Reeves.
Hello there. Oh, goodness. And of course, this is when the iPad decides to be difficult. There we are. Well, good morning. You may be wondering exactly how you are going to do anything to meaningfully address the opioid epidemic. And yet, surprisingly, your faith community is uniquely poised to help stem the tide of opioid abuse and overdose deaths. You see, your faith community has crucial information about the people who are at risk for addiction to opioids. And that's because you have the prayer list. You know who's asked for prayers because they're ill or having surgery. You know what folks have a loved one who is injured or chronically ill. And that list of people, the folks on your prayer list, those are the folks at greatest risk for addiction and death from opioid overdose. And all of you are far more trusted by those individuals and their families than many of the professionals that they might encounter who would try to intervene. Now, the best way to stop opioid addiction is to prevent it from starting. So let's talk about some common risk factors. The first and most powerful risk factor for opiate addiction is receiving a valid prescription for opiates from a doctor. This can be for pain relief after surgery, after an injury, or for relief from chronic pain. Current estimates state that between 26 to 44% of people who are currently addicted to opiates became addicted while using their prescription medication. That is 1/4 to almost 1/2 of opiate addicts who became addicts simply by following their doctor's orders. Obviously, they strayed from that, but that is where they began. Now, a second powerful risk factor is having prescription opiates present in the home. This is the risk referred to as diversion. When someone, often a family member or a family friend, browses the medicine cabinet looking for medications that look like they might be fun for getting high. This means that both the person who has been prescribed the medication, their entire family, all of their friends, and anyone else who visits their home is at risk for addiction as soon as the prescription is filled and present in the home. Now, it's important for you to realize that the risk factors for addiction and death from diverted opioids are much higher, simply because they are being used recreationally. And I would add that most people who are recreationally using opiates are not taking them orally as prescribed. They are crushing them, and then they will either inject them, snort them, or smoke them. And that greatly increases the likelihood of an overdose. Believe it or not, an inhaled drug, a drug in smoke form, is far more powerful than any other form of that drug because of the immediacy of how it is absorbed. Now, we need to look at some of the other red flags that someone in your faith community might be dealing with addiction. Addiction is wily and silent, and it sneaks up on folks before they realize that it is happening. And it is a long time before they realize just how much trouble that they have gotten themselves into. And it's probably 2 to 3 times longer than that before their friends and their family realize just how big this problem has become. Addiction is stealthy, but it does have a few telltale signs that come early in the addiction process. The first telltale signs of opiate addiction include deviation from medication directions for usage and increased tolerance. This can be summed up as needing increasingly strong medication and amounts of medication to manage the pain without any advance in the disease that is causing the pain. Other red flags of addiction include continued use of opiates despite negative life consequences, such as a lost job or failing relationships, increasing irritability and escalating levels of confrontational behavior, increasing isolation from family and former friends, increased financial difficulties that may require rescue by their faith community or their family members, and lying about whereabouts and circumstances for their behaviors. The red flags of addiction are different with teenagers, who might begin to isolate from their original social circle and gather a whole new and far more undesirable set of friends. Their grades will change. They'll have a hot temper and they'll be belligerent, more so than you would expect from the average teenager. You'll notice a decrease in extracurricular activities if they had previously been active. If they work, they might start skipping work. It is likely that they will sneak out at night, and they may begin to steal money and saleable objects from their siblings and their parents. The red flags of addiction in seniors, the red flags of addiction in seniors include increasing secretiveness, increased isolation from friends and family, and also increased isolation from their faith community, decreased interest in formerly pleasurable activities, decreased appetite and increased sleeping, and other symptoms of depression such as irritability or a sense of hopelessness about the future. So now you've got all this information. What are you supposed to do about it? Well, remember, you've got your prayer list, which indicates to you who is encountering some of the primary risk factors for addiction. Well, it's time to take that knowledge and get bold. The intervention we suggest is going to involve a face-to-face visit because it will be easier to say and do what you need to say and do if you are face-to-face. And you might be thinking right now, okay, yeah, this is not going to happen. There is no way that I'm going to do this. And let's be honest, a conversation like this is not going to be easy. You will be uncomfortable, and you will be fearful that your faith community member will push you away or become angry. And how exactly are you supposed to start this conversation? Well, I have a suggestion that might help. I have a friend who works in a Phoenix hospital training chaplains, and she has this amazing method of starting uncomfortable conversations. She will look at the person and smile, and then she'll say, "I need to say something to you that might be difficult to hear. Is that okay?" I need to say something to you that might be difficult to hear. Is that okay? Saying something that blunt and obvious prepares the person and gives them a chance to say no, to admit that they're really not ready to hear anything uncomfortable. And if they aren't ready to hear difficult words, then don't share difficult words with them. If they don't want to hear it, then they're not ready to do anything about it. It would be better to wait or to talk to another family member or friend. And that's all it takes to get this started. I need to say something to you that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay? One sentence, and it opens the door to everything that comes afterwards. And what's your biggest challenge once you get the conversation started? It's getting them to believe that they are actually at risk for anything. If they are at risk for addiction, they're going to poo-poo the idea that it could happen to them. If they're at risk of someone diverting their medication, they're going to think that their family, their kids, and their friends are all way better than that and would never take someone else's medications. And if they're already addicted, they're going to be full of excuses why they're actually not addicted and why they genuinely need their medication in larger amounts and way more often. Yeah, your best weapon is information, an honest but gentle confrontation. When it comes to the risk for addiction and diversion, you have to remind people that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to become an addict. They also don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to leave my medication out on the countertop so that teenage girl down the street that my son likes so much can steal a pill from me and overdose and die later this week. Yeah, nobody says that, okay? Nobody plans this stuff. It just happens. As life is going along, it just happens. When it is time for this conversation, you're going to need to bring some things with you. Any notes you might have taken during this during this presentation, because you're not going to be able to remember everything like this and just spout it off the top of your head. I have an iPad here, I'm not doing that off the top of my head either. Number 2, you're going to need information about small home electronic safes, like the ones you find in hotels. You can get those at Home Depot or at Harbor Freight. You can get them online at Amazon. You can get them at Walmart. And they're really not that terribly expensive. Now, why would you need that? Well, because the best way to prevent diversion of medications is to have all opiates and other medications that are attractive for recreational use locked up in a safe that only the user of those medications can open. As a side note, these safes are really useful for locking up knives and dangerous over-the-counter medications, like Tylenol, in homes when someone is suicidal. And finally, you're going to need to bring with you a dose of Narcan, either the one you're going to receive today or another one from Sonoran Prevention Works or from a source like CVS or Walgreens. You're going to need to be ready to discuss what is known as iatrogenic addiction, otherwise known as addiction to a prescription medication that was received for a legitimate medical condition from a medical professional. The people that you know don't want to become addicts, but they sure can get there by accident. People become addicted because they overuse their medication in an attempt to just continue functioning on a daily basis. They just want to go to work, pay their bills, do the chores around the house and take care of their family. So it's not like you can say, don't take your meds. That's not wise, and we need to encourage them to be wise and to talk with their doctors about alternative methods of pain relief and when it will be time to switch from their prescription opioids to those alternative methods. Now, alternative methods of pain relief usually involves a mix of methods, including non-narcotic pain relievers like Tylenol or ibuprofen, but then there's also lidocaine patches, capsaicin patches, meditation, massage, Reiki, yoga, acupuncture, Tai Chi, self-hypnosis, and sometimes even medical cannabis. It's really important to remember that God created all of these things, and that includes the opium poppies and the cannabis plant. And God created those things to be used for our benefit, not for our harm. So when the opiate medication that we use to manage our pain becomes more harmful than helpful, turning to the other things that God created for our good is a wise thing to do. And the more safe methods we have for relieving our pain, the more we can manage our pain. Now, when it comes to diversion, you have to remind the folks that you're speaking to that all human beings have a side that does things that we are not at all proud of. Even close friends and family members can be tempted to divert medications, not because they're bad people, but because they are human and they want to escape the pain that they're in, whether that is emotional or spiritual or physical. Now, some of you may fear that you will offend people when you speak to them about addiction. They may feel accused or singled out. They might feel like you have a really low opinion of them. Be ready to assure anyone you speak to about this that you hold them in very high esteem, or else you wouldn't even be willing to have such a difficult conversation with them. You have to be bold, though. Don't be afraid to make people angry with you for speaking up. When I was an intern in ministry, somebody told me that in order to be able to do good ministry, I had to be willing to make people angry. Now, of course, they didn't say it quite that nicely. What they said was, if you aren't pissing people off, you're not doing good ministry. Well, I know that all of us want to do good ministry, okay? And speaking like this, speaking out like this, is really hard, and you will not always be well received. But we need to be bold for the sake of our God and for the love, our faith communities, and our community at large. So be bold, and remember this sentence. I need to say something to you that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay? Lastly, I would like to share with you some resources for information on and treatment of addiction. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, is a part of our federal government, and the resources that they have online are comprehensive. They have information on treatment centers all over the United States. And I want you to remember that addiction often develops in people who have other underlying issues. For instance, veterans who might also be suffering from war trauma and PTSD. If they become addicted, they will need treatment for their trauma and PTSD as well as for their addiction. And it is crucial to find treatment programs that meet the addict's individual needs for treatment as well as their family's financial limitations. The good luck is that we here in Arizona have a host of treatment facilities and programs that can be discovered through the Arizona Opioid Assistance and Referral Line. While Arizona treatment facilities will also be listed on the SAMHSA website, the Arizona Opioid Assistance and Referral Line provides information about local outpatient treatment programs for adults and adolescents, as well as the inpatient facilities that you would also find listed on the SAMHSA website. Additionally, there are a lot of really good substance abuse counselors here in Arizona, as well as a host of compassionate, effective trauma and mood disorder counselors. And many of these counselors will be available through the person you speak to through their insurance program. Now, helping that person sort through the list of counselors that they receive from their insurance company can be a huge help when they are overwhelmed with their own needs and facing the admission that they are addicted. Thank you for listening so attentively and for coming to this training, for listening online. Again, please don't hesitate to look up the stuff that is available on our Attorney General's website. And may God bless you and walk with you as you serve your faith community and the people of Arizona.
Thank you, Reverend Reeves. Let me mention also that after we have our last presenter today, we will have Q&A, and we will also distribute Narcan to everyone that's present here today. And we will leave some with Pastor Barton so that they will have some for their staff. Our next speaker is Mr. Doug Larson from All Saints Lutheran Church. He lost his son to opiate abuse, and he will give you the view of opiate addiction. Doug?
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, we're here this evening. First of all, I want to thank everybody that took time from their Saturday night to come to our presentation. We're trying to shed a light on an epidemic that's killing thousands of people in this country every week. And we're trying to get information out that will help maybe slow the problem down. A brief on my story: my son Preston died about 6 years ago from an overdose of heroin that we suspect might have had fentanyl at that time. We don't know. They didn't check for that then. But he'd gone through 5 years of trying to break the habit. We don't know when he got his first taste of it, but he broke his wrist at an earlier age when he was a teenager, and the doctor put him on Percocet. At that time, I was a single parent. I had no idea that that would be bad. The doctor said it's a good idea, so we assumed that it was the best thing to do. So he was on that. That's the first time he had a taste of it. On March 6th of 2016, my wife and I were driving back from Albuquerque, and I talked to my son in the afternoon, and he was doing fine. We were going to start a program the next day in another city to get him away from Phoenix, from people he knew. At 7:30 that night, I talked to him for the last time, and everything seemed fine. The next morning, at about 7:30, my other son and I were at my office waiting for him to call to pick him up to go to the program. We got the call, but it was his mom. She was at his house, and he was in the bathroom with the door locked on the floor, and she'd called 911. We rushed out there just in time for the fire department official to tell us that we'd lost our son. That's a pain that no parent ever should have to go through and don't ever want to. So we are trying to make the point about the opioids, the problem we have in Arizona, and we're going to discuss real quickly. I got 15 minutes, so we're going to discuss opioids, how they're abused, how big the problem is, how we got there. But the first thing I'd like to point out is that what we're dealing with is truly an epidemic in this country. And this is a short video.
The United States of America is writing a prescription for pain that is wiping young people like me off the map. Our addiction to legally prescribed pain pills like oxycodone or hydrocodone is leading a lot of us straight to heroin. That's because prescription painkillers and heroin are both opioids. So when we can't get a refill, heroin is the only way to stop our pain or to get the same high. And heroin's less expensive and easier to get. I can have black tar heroin delivered to my house faster than a pizza. Once we start, we have to keep using, not for the high, but because we get sick from withdrawal if we try to stop. It's an epidemic. We're rich, poor, and middle class. We're from farms, cities, and suburbs. We're from families who had big hopes that we'd live healthy lives and not fall so far from such a high.
Opiates are basically a pain reliever that attaches to the receptors in your brain and in your back and in your gastrointestinal tract. So they're everywhere. What they do is they slow everything down. They relax everything. And like Reverend Tina said, about 30 to 40% of the people they figure that are addicted you get a real nice, comfortable feeling, just real relaxing. Those are the people that are in a likely chance of becoming addicted. The problem with this kind of a drug is that it takes more and more to use it, to get the same high. They call it chasing the high because the person's trying to get the same feeling they got that first time they got that comfortable feeling. But it takes more. So you get one pill the first time, then maybe in a couple days you need 2 pills to get the same hit. Then in a couple weeks you're doing 6 pills 5 times a day trying to get them, and you're running out of doctors you can get them from, and then where do you go? Then you're talking about getting on the street. Oh, I'm not sure where to aim this thing. These are the different types of opiates. We got organic and synthetic. The organic would, of course, be the poppy plants. That's kind of going away. The synthetic is where it's all at now as far as getting illegal drugs. It's changed to fentanyl. Fentanyl is leading the way with everything. They're even putting fentanyl, which is a drug that they're now putting in virtually everything. You get it in cocaine, you can get it in methamphetamines, you can get it in heroin. This is also a drug that is being put together. You can actually buy the products to make fentanyl from Amazon or Alibaba and make your own. These are being made not in a pharmacy or in a clinic, in a safe setting. They're being made in a garage or in a house or something. You have no idea what you're getting. These are the This is the molecular makeup of the different drugs. You can see that heroin's virtually the same as the legal drugs that they have. And it's just a graph to show you. This is how it starts. Again, like Reverend Tina said, it starts with maybe a swallowed pill from a dental surgery or an accident of some sort or a minor surgery. Then it can move to, when you want to get a little better hit, you can bypass the time release in any kind of medication by crushing it, and then you can snort it and smoke it, and it gets in your system very quickly. The most dangerous is probably injecting because it gets in your system immediately, but when you inject it, you're talking about people on the street that are using dirty needles. And then you're talking HIV, hepatitis. I have a good friend who lost her son, Rhonda is her name. She lost her son, Brandon, shortly after I lost my son. And they found him in California in a hospital in the ICU. He had gotten a dirty needle somewhere and got sepsis. It got to his heart. He lived 82 days in an ICU, then passed away. She still lives with that just as hard now as she did that day, virtually. I mean, she can talk about him, but I mean, she still has a hard time with it. But California paid for 82 days of an ICU. Very expensive. But again, fentanyl is where this is going. In 2020, there was about 58,000 deaths from opiate overdose or from overdoses. About 58,000 in 2020. In 2021, there was 107,000. So that's averaging about 293 a day, or 1 every 12 minutes in this country is dying from. And you'd almost have to think logically, well, if that happens after a couple months, you'd think we'd be out of people that were going to die from it, but it's continuing on. So the problem is far greater than we think, and we need to do something to stop it. I'm sorry. I wanted to show you that. This is a picture of some pills. Half of those are legal and half of them are fake. You couldn't tell the difference because you can go on Amazon and you can buy a pill press and you can get it stamped with Xanax, you can get it stamped with Percocet, anything you want. The pill will look right. But even now, the pills that are getting out there, they're making them look like Skittles. They're candy looking. So you think, oh, that can't hurt me. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, not handling this device very well. Why people start using, of course, it's prescribed medicine that can cause it. They start out with something like that. The problem is when you want to continue with the high and you start needing more, you develop a tolerance to this drug. And if you remember, it's attached to the pain receptors in your back and your stomach and your brain. To get off it now, you need to go through a withdrawal. The withdrawal from heroin is pretty quick. It's about 3 or 4 days. But everything in your body is miserable. It's been described as being like 100 times worse than the worst case of the flu, because when your stomach is not right, you're not right. And you imagine your back and your head, the whole thing is a big mess. And I still don't understand why anybody would use it to experiment, but that's one of the things they say is a problem. Why people keep using them, I guess I just kind of described that. Basically, you get the tolerance built up, and it's just scary to go through the withdrawal. The last time I did a withdrawal with my son at my house, we reversed all the locks in the house so the deadbolts were on the inside, so he couldn't get out of the house without a key. And he agreed to it. We went 7 days, we didn't move, and he went through 3 days of misery. But he survived it, and we moved on. But the emotional withdrawal from this kind of a drug, or from any addiction, pretty much is forever. It never goes away. You always remember it if you're a user. This is a quick story of Nacho, just a brief story of what it's like to go through the withdrawals.
I had gone through tons of withdrawals, times where, you're sick, it feels like 1,000 times worse than the flu. You're sweaty, you're trying to get through anything. I would walk into class, in these withdrawals, and I would go through this horrible week, and, never gonna do this again. And 2 days later, I'd already made it through the acute withdrawals, but I was using again, and knowing full well that I'm gonna have to go through that again at some point. I wish I knew really what these prescription pills were. These are all synthetic forms of heroin.
How big the problem is? Well, like I said, 107,000 people died in the United States in 2021, so the problem virtually doubled from 2020 to 2021. We're talking about, we kind of compared at one time, 293 people a day is about almost how many people you have in an airliner. If we had an airliner crash in somewhere in the United States every day with no survivors, we'd do something about that. This is just a little bit of a story about, some graphs about different totals of people who have passed away from the overdoses. You can just see from March 20 to March 2021 was when it really started to pick up, and that the deaths from overdoses exceeds those of suicides and motor vehicle accidents combined, although there's some argument to that because some suicides may be something different than that. It may have been an overdose. They're not really, some of that's a little bit unknown. Gosh. It went back to the beginning. I'm not sure what happened there. Anyway, these are this is the main routes of the cartels bringing the drugs into the United States. You can see that Arizona is basically the epicenter of the opioid overdose problem. Also Texas, it comes in. The sad thing about it is that the only reason that this works for these people, these cartels, is because we desire the drugs. We have people that want it. So there's one point I'm going to make at the end of my program that's probably the most important point I think I can make about this. And I really hope we start working towards that, because we really need to let the young people now have some information so they can avoid this kind of a tragedy. Because these cartels aren't going to stop. They can't do marijuana anymore because that's all legal. So we're going to discuss actions we can take, actions parents can take. This is truly my main point, if I can. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to run a couple of screens forward here, but anyway, the reason the main point that I want to make, and I'll bring it up now, is that we need to talk to the kids. We need to talk to our children. As grandparents, we need to talk to our grandkids. As a caretaker of children, you're an uncle, an aunt, whatever. If you can talk to the kids about drugs and explain what the drug problem is, and open-ended questions, which are questions that don't have a yes or no answer, but basically we want to explain peer pressure so they understand that there may be a time when someone tries to talk them into doing something stupid, The next video I'm going to show someone that did that. If it's something stupid and you got five guys standing there and they're going to do something, they know one of them knows it's dumb and he goes, "No, I don't want to do it." Probably the other four would say, or three of them say, "No, I don't want to do it either." Someone had to stand up and say no. Explain peer pressure to the kids. But the reason we say this is in a survey of over 10,000 high school kids who did not use drugs, the number one reason by far given, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. Even if you think they're not listening, even if you think they don't care, they think you weren't around when you were young, water wasn't running, you didn't run any water yet and things, it doesn't matter. They're listening. They do hear what you're saying. Explain your expectations, talk to them, but keep talking no matter what. This is what you look for. These are the kind of things I found, the spoon and stuff like this, not hidden very well. And then you look at that arm of that person there, that could be meth, that could be heroin. There are people that do that. They'll take the heroin, and that slows them down. Then they'll throw meth into it to kind of kick them forward. They're a little bit robotic moving, but they're tearing their body apart from the inside out. Gosh. This is the last story. This is Aaron, healthy-looking kid there. He went to a pill party, and they just had a bowl of pills. And they all just took some to see what would happen. He took some of the pills and all of a sudden went to sleep. They were not sure what to do with him. His friends tried to wake him up, couldn't wake him up, so they called the mother because he wasn't at his own house. She tried to pour ice water on him. He still didn't come out. So they finally called 911. Here's Aaron's story. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry I don't know how to run this thing. God damn it. Okay. There we go.
He was full of energy.
Full of energy and loved to wrestle and goof around and
Play. He was very lighthearted, fun child.
I didn't know what he was taking. It was 220. Handsome. The addiction is so strong. These kids don't know how to handle it.
Ready to get in the chair? It's a fine mess you got us into, isn't it?
We'd much rather have Aaron like this than dead. And a lot of parents don't have that luxury. We can kiss our son at night.
What a life, huh? Dad shave you in there? You like shaving? One yes, two no. No.
The worst consequence is death. Other consequences are, like Aaron, trapped in your own body, alive, but still unable to communicate the way that you would hope that you could. You also lose all of your hopes and dreams and things that you wanted to accomplish in your life.
You can help.
Did you ever think anything bad would happen taking prescription pills, Aaron? 1 for yes, 2 for no. No.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time or any time on this really. Maureen's going to be up next and she's going to discuss the naloxone and what that can do. But there is some for everybody here, and these are, Fred got these for everyone, and they are expensive, so it's really quite a deal that he got them. But I will just say, if ever you think someone's overdosed, don't mess around with it. Don't try to figure it out, 911 it. Gosh. Am I just aiming this wrong? This is just the thing that the government, Arizona did so that you can buy the Narcan without any kind of a prescription. You can just go pick it up. If you know somebody who's using, we've got a couple of flyers up here that I brought that have QR codes on them that you can use to get help. I know when I was going through it, I had nobody to call. I had no idea who to call. You can't call the police, you don't think, because you know that's going to just get your person in trouble. I had no idea who to talk to for help. These have some people that can be wonderful for you. And self-care. if you're in this, if you know anyone that's in this, they're in a 24/7 nightmare. It doesn't go away the entire time. And they're going to need help. They need someone to talk to. These numbers are all on the QR codes that I have on those two forms up here, and along with these numbers here. The last page here, if you're law enforcement, we would like law enforcement to, of course they have to follow the law, but they could also be helpful by giving you some information when you're in a situation where you have to come across them, especially with drug. They may know some things that could help you. It would be helpful if they could give you some kind of information. An educator, it would be nice, I would think, that if an educator noticed that a child was acting different in school or hanging around with different people that maybe the parents wouldn't approve of, that it would be real nice if someone maybe would let the parents give them a bit of a heads up. Healthcare providers, same thing. If they're in a hospital, or you're in a hospital with an overdose or something, you're terrified, you're with your loved one, if they could give you some names or some places to go for help, that would be very helpful too. But if you're a parent or a guardian or any guardian of a child, or involved in any way, if you can talk to them about peer pressure, explain to them what you expect, let them know what these drugs are doing to people, and just give them the information so that they can make a good decision when it's their time, that would be the best thing you can do. But I bring it up with I've got 2 grandkids, I bring it up with them almost every time I see them. We talk about it for a little bit, just bring it up. It's not like the whole thing. That's it for me. Thank you.
One thing I want to mention too before this, and we have to add this to our presentation. The use of fentanyl, the pills, has become a date rape drug, like some of the drugs from years previous. So that's something that you have to be very careful of, because if you get too high, you don't have any control over your body or your mind. So you have to be extremely careful. But the best thing to do is just to stay away from fentanyl pills, period. Our next presenter is Mrs. Maureen Rowland. She's an RN, BSN, CSPI, and she's the managing director, Banner Poison and Drug Information Center. And she's going to explain to you a little bit about Narcan and a number of other things that you can utilize for your kids and the older adults in your family. Maureen, it's all you.
Thank you, Fred. And I won't make a joke about work being a prison, the pun there. So thank you for having us. Our opioid group here, we've been doing this for several years now. Unfortunately, we continue to see this become more and more of a problem, so we thank you for coming and wanting to participate and do what you can to hopefully curb this epidemic that we're seeing here, not only throughout the United States, but Arizona in particular. I'll just go through that real quick. So just a quick little intro on the Poison Control Centers. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with this. I'm an RN and director at the Banner Poison and Drug Information Center, which covers all of Maricopa County. So when you call that poison control helpline, the 1-800-222-1222, that comes to the Poison Center where I work. We have another poison center in Tucson that covers all of the other counties, but we work together as a system to cover the entire state. And we actually manage the Arizona Opioid Assistance and Referral Line. So 24/7, it's a free service that anyone can call at any time and talk to one of the registered nurses, pharmacists, or doctors that work at the Poison Center, and we can help, whether it's a healthcare professional needing assistance with somebody that they want to perhaps get into treatment, somebody that has overdosed, or whether you're just a family member or even seeking assistance yourself. You can call that number at any time and you can speak with one of us. We are all specialists in poison information. I am a certified specialist in poison information, and that just means we are highly specialized in anything that's related to medications, chemicals, envenomations, anything. That's kind of our specialty area. So again, this is something that we've been dealing with in poison centers with drugs of abuse for many, many years. So this is, for us, a specialty area that we are really trying to make an impact with in the community. Briefly on the opioid plant again, so just so you understand how naloxone or Narcan works, you need to understand the opiates in the process too. So if you see on the plant there, that sap that's coming out from the plant, that's where the alkaloids are, and that's where they get the natural opioids that they put in medications. And so that's where we initially started using the poppies, they're the opiates for pain or sedation. And those are part of most of the legally prescribed medications that are out there. Then really kind of in the 1920s, 1930s, they started experimenting on a lot of different medications, including opioids, and started synthesizing them and came up with some synthetic opioids, and that's where we see the fentanyl. Now, fentanyl was initially created for hospital use. It was not the intent for anyone to be using this recreationally, and we still use it quite frequently in the hospitals for trauma victims, somebody who was in a severe car accident and they come in, and we're using very, very small amounts of fentanyl. So it was never intended for the purpose of these drug cartels to manufacture and dispense to the public as they are right now. But there was an initial purpose for fentanyl. So when we talk about fentanyl, I just want you to understand too that it's a synthetic, so it doesn't act exactly like the natural opioids, and it is extremely more potent than a natural opiate would be too. And then again, so just what does it look like? So you can see the plant, the prescriptions, heroin, which we do see heroin is starting to kind of taper off a little bit now that it's more easily accessible to get fentanyl on the streets right now. And this is the big one, especially for the kids that are here. I do want you to see, so these blue pills, and I hope, and for parents, I want to make sure you're talking to your kids and showing this to your kids, like any of these pills that you're seeing on the streets right now, or in school, if somebody tries to give you a pill, they have fentanyl in them, and one pill can kill. Half of a pill can kill. We don't know how much fentanyl is in each one of these because they are not professionals that are making these pills up. They're just selling them on the street for $5, if not less. So one pill can kill. And I'm sure you all see on the news, almost every night it seems like we're seeing another big drug bust here in Arizona because they're coming up right from the border. They're putting them in various things. You know, there was some with the newer fentanyl pills that are coming out, they're rainbow colored. So the cartels and people on the street are understanding now, oh, the blue one, that might be a little bit more dangerous. So the cartels are wanting to market to everyone to, you know, they want you to continue to use this. They want the younger generation to continue to buy these. If it gets out that, oh, the blue one's the dangerous one, but I can take the purple or the pink one, and that one's going to be better and it's safer. So I think there was a little misconception as far as, are they really trying to get, you know, they're not toddlers. They're not making them look like candy because they want toddlers to take them, but they are definitely making them more appealing to the younger users to get them hooked. And then I believe there was just, I have not verified this, but I believe there was just a bust where they were actually putting them in some candy boxes to get them across the border. Again, I don't think that that was the intent to hand them out for Halloween. It could certainly happen. You definitely want to make sure you're checking your children's candy, but the purpose of that was to get them across because they're trying to get them across that border however they can. So please make sure you're talking to your kids. Kids, just do not take anything. Always show your parents, especially at Halloween time now. If you're going out trick-or-treating, we don't take anything without showing our parents. I see several kids here, so I just want to make sure you guys understand that. It's very dangerous. I believe Doug already talked about how it's used, common forms of fentanyl, and again, for the users on the streets, you can see the multicolored ones, the blue, and then they're also putting it in Xanax pills. So it looks like they make it a print, it looks like a Xanax. People are, purchasing this on the street, thinking that they're purchasing a Xanax and there's fentanyl in it, and they're dying from it. These are just some street names. This, again, is very good for parents and grandparents to educate yourselves on what is it called. If I hear this or see it in a Snapchat, Snapchat is a tool that people are using now to meet up with their drug dealers, or, for kids, they have these little code names and they'll go meet them on a corner, and just like in the video that Doug had shown, it's as easy as, quicker than having a pizza delivered to you. So it's very available, and these kids, especially the teens, they're very smart with their devices now. So, check the phones and be educated on some of the terms that they're using. Luckily, here in Arizona, we do have a lot of great task force that are trying to get the message out. So if, maybe you have seen this. We have some billboards that are along the freeways now. It's also flashing up in commercials. But again, can you tell the deadly dose? If you can't, neither can your kid. Just trying to get the message out, get the visual out. This is what it is. This goes to the whole potency thing. So again, these are amateur people that are putting these pills together. So it's not a pharmaceutical grade. You have no idea. So these kids are going to parties, the pill parties. You have 10 people, one person could take a pill and there's 0 fentanyl in it, and then the other person could take one pill and it probably could have killed all 10 of them. So there's just no way of knowing how much fentanyl is in these products because of the crude processing that they do to manufacture it. So I did want to show some specific stats for Arizona. I don't know if this is too small, but you can see here, this is the data from 2020 versus 2021. So you can see the fentanyl has gone up from 31.2% to 39.3%, and this is non-fatal opioid events. We're seeing a decrease in the oxycodone, decrease in heroin, decrease in the prescription ones, but the fentanyl just keeps shooting up. And then methamphetamine is still a huge issue here in Arizona, and they are, to Doug's point earlier, they are putting fentanyl in the methamphetamines too. And we were seeing this in the poison centers 5-6 years ago too, where we had people that were coming in having overdosed, and it looked exactly like a heroin overdose, but their urine drug screen was clean. Because the fentanyl is a synthetic, it took us a little while to figure out and catch up on the fact that these drugs on the street were tainted. And again, here's just another graph showing the overdose deaths that we are seeing here, and they continue to climb. So as I said, we've been battling this now just in our little group for several years now, but we need to make a bigger impact, and that's where we need to get you all involved in helping us, and just education, talk about it. This is just where we're seeing it, mostly in males. That seems to be the biggest demographic, and then also in the younger age group. So 18 to 34 really seems to make up the large majority of where we're seeing the fatalities. And then this is where I wanted, because I'm sure for some of you sitting here, you're probably like, I don't know anyone that takes an opioid. I'm happy to be here and learn and arm yourself with the knowledge. But this is a really good graph that shows the impact that it has on everyone in our community right now. And this graph shows EMS law enforcement responses for suspected opioid overdoses monthly in Arizona from January 2020 to December 2021. So this is every month that we're seeing here in December, 764. So every time there's an overdose response, and EMS or police are having to respond to this, and the more and more we're seeing, that's somebody that potentially is having a heart attack at home, a stroke, a car accident. This is taking law enforcement and EMS away from responding to all of the incidents that we're seeing in our community. And I'm not saying this to say that they should not be responding. I'm just saying the magnitude of it and the stress that it's putting on those first responders to have to, on top of what they normally would see in an average city, that we're throwing all of this on top of them. And so we can understand the stress that those first responders are under right now, just looking at the magnitude of the problem that we're seeing in our community. And again, going back to the receptors, this is really important for the Narcan piece. So as Doug was just discussing earlier, those alkaloids that I was talking about, they do bind to a lot of receptors in your body. And the major one would be responders in your respiratory system, which can slow your breathing so much to the point where you stop breathing, and that's where we see death. So how does Narcan help? Or naloxone is really the generic name, Narcan is the brand name. Narcan is a strong enough of a drug that it knocks the opiates off of those receptors. So when you give it, it immediately is pushing that opiate off, and then it's reviving the person, hopefully. Now, fentanyl is extremely strong again, so one dose may not be enough. You might have to give several doses. That's where it's extremely important, again, that you're getting 911 to come immediately, but it's definitely gonna help. So that's just the science behind it. The only caveat being is that the opioids usually last longer in your system than the Narcan does. So these people, if you're helping somebody, they do need to go into an emergency room. They do need to be monitored because the Narcan will wear off likely before the opiate does, and so they could potentially overdose again because the opiate is still in their system. You can give it IV, IM, sub-Q, or intranasally, which is what we have here for you guys today. And I think one of the fears that a lot of people have is that, you know, if I give this, I'm going to immediately put the person into withdrawal, and what if they become violent? That would be pretty unlikely in a community setting and giving the intranasal. Typically, when we see the people react in that way, it's usually in an emergency room when you have a higher dose of Narcan that's given to them, and they usually have some other drugs on board too. But it can put them into withdrawal, so that is something definitely that you want to think about. How do you identify if the person is overdosed? And you know, again, these sessions are great because this is what we would consider to be kind of a soft target area where people are coming potentially to get help, where you are more likely to see somebody who has overdosed. So the first thing you want to do is you know, try and get them to respond. If they're not responsive, you might watch their breathing, seeing if they have shallow breathing, blue around the lips, pale skin, limp body, slow or no heartbeat, and then very small pupils. That's a telltale sign of an opioid or opiate overdose, is when their pupils are very small. So, if they're not responding, you know, again, you want to make sure that you're in a safe area. So your safety is priority. Make sure you feel comfortable and you're in a safe area. You can try a sternal rub, see if that rouses them. You can, make sure the scene is safe. Yep. Try to wake them, arouse them, and then if no response, then that's when you would want to initiate 911. You can on your phone, this is something I always recommend, and this is not just even in an overdose situation. If you're ever responding to somebody that needs assistance, you can call 911 on your phone and put it on speaker, and then just have it next to you. And you can be talking to them while you're still assisting the person that needs help. So call 911, let them know where you are, what you're seeing, and then you can ask them for assistance as well. They can give you instruction on CPR over the phone too, if you're comfortable doing that. If you're CPR trained, you've gone through the course, you know what to do. If you're not, then you know, again, you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe too. So, and then I do have, I think I'm still live here. So it's really very simple, actually. This is what you guys will be getting today. It's really, if anyone's ever had a cold before, it's just like an intranasal spray, essentially. So you just want to make sure you take it out of the box, and then, actually they're getting single ones. Remove the wrapper. Don't test it. It does seem like you really want to push that and you want to make sure it works, but there's only one dose in there, so please don't test it. And it's really very intuitive, just with the finger placement. They've YouTube videos on it too if you want a little more instruction to see it visually, but you just basically put your thumb there, get it about 3/4 of the way into their nostril, and then you just plunge. Important at this point, again, thinking about withdrawal, this is where you want to make sure you get them onto their side, because if it is somebody who does have an addiction and you put them into withdrawal, they very likely are going to vomit. So you want to make sure you're putting them on the side, because we don't want them to choke on that, and that's called a recovery position. CPR, if you know it, again. This is just a few, I think Doug already hit this as far as what exactly is withdrawal and what we're concerned about, what we're seeing. And then this hits on that last video too. One of our major concerns and why Narcan is so important is brain injury. So the longer the brain is without oxygen, the greater the chance that we're gonna see the brain injury. And there's two types that we think about, and especially in the healthcare world, is the anoxic or hypoxic brain injury. And I unfortunately had a case that I just had yesterday with a 17-year-old that had anoxic brain injury. They were keeping him on life support while the parents made the decision whether or not to donate organs. But he was down for too long. It was a fentanyl overdose. So, I mean, it's daily that we're getting at the Poison Center, but, you know, when I saw that story, it hit home again where I thought, you know, a couple minutes could have potentially gotten him to the point where he was still living with some deficit. But so the longer the brain is without oxygen, the greater the risk. And then the other thing that we see a lot with overdose patients is the pulmonary edema. So again, going back to that vomiting, very often they aspirate, so they get some vomit into their lungs, and then that can cause an infection. So again, this is really important that they go into an emergency room so they can be evaluated and monitored, because we often see some secondary issues after that. Like Doug had said, we do have a law here. It's an open prescription, so basically you can go anywhere and get naloxone. You will have to pay for it if you go into CVS, but there are places that Sonora Prevention works. There are places where you can get it for free that do trainings. They also have fentanyl strips now too that are legalized. One of our representatives, her son passed away from a fentanyl overdose. He bought one of the Xanax on the streets and he passed away from a fentanyl overdose unintentionally, but she passed through the law to get fentanyl strips made available so you can potentially test the drugs. They're not 100% reliable, but it's one more tool that we have. And then this, I'm sorry, I added some slides here. Oh yeah, so this is the percentage of EMS law enforcement responders for non-fatal that administered naloxone. So you can see EMS, 75% are administering naloxone on those overdose sites, and then about 5% from a bystander or layperson. So it is of value, that 5%, that could be you. So keep it on you. I always recommend don't keep it in your car in Arizona in the hot months because it's way too hot, but keep it on you. You just never know when you're going to be able to help somebody. So just take home points. It's still a major problem here in Arizona. We are battling this every day and it continues to get worse. I think, again, to Doug's point earlier with the young ones, we need to change the tide with the youth and the culture. You know, in the United States, we are a culture of seeking pain medication for lots of things that we perhaps don't need to seek pain medication for. I think we just need to change our mindset of when and why we're doing that. Prescribers are getting on board with that because they have to. A lot of states are changing their laws, prescribing laws, but I think we need to get away from that mentality of that we need to take a pill for everything. That's one other thing we can do. And then just talking frequently. Educate yourselves, educate your kids, educate your parents. Talk to them about what you're seeing, what's going on in our communities, and what the resources are. And then one other thing I did want, this is kind of something new, this, that Fred, you're handing this out too, right, Deterra? So this is a drug deactivation system, so everyone is going home with one of these too. Back to Tina's point, if you do have opioids in, or any prescription medication, because we see this with, you know, in the Poison Center, I see it not just with opiates, but with any medication, keep it locked up. If you're done with it, if your script is over or you've taken the amount that you need to take and you have leftover, you can use these to deactivate medications. There's clear instructions. Again, I think this one also has a website that you can go to that will actually show you in the video how to actually do this. But don't leave old medications in your home. I know that's a lot of people, especially with antibiotics. I don't know why y'all want to hang on to your antibiotics just in case. Please, don't keep old medications in your home, and keep the ones that you do have locked up. So just another tool that we're trying to do what we can to throw at this.
If any of you have any questions out there? Now, are there any nurses here? We have one nurse, right? Any, two? Okay. Any doctors? Okay. Okay. Any questions for Tina? You want to come up? Or Doug? No questions? Okay. Well, let's do this. Will the nurses come up front and get some Narcan first? Or either you can. Thank you, Tina. Okay. Now, what I will like for you to do, the remainder of the audience, if you come up front, we will give each of you a Narcan individual one to take home, and feel free to reach out and contact us in the future if we can assist you in any way. And thank you very much for participating tonight. And working together, we can get a handle on this, but we have to really bear down and do some yeoman work in order to make this happen, because what happened is that we got caught when the opiate, when the COVID-19 hit. That hit right as we were getting off the ground. And as a result of COVID, we were no longer able to get into the churches, synagogues, mosques, et cetera, et cetera. So it left us, sort of holding the bag. And we're trying to get back into action so that we can start providing regular training sessions up and down the state, and so we can hopefully get a handle on this situation. We've done